here at UCT, and it's my incredible pleasure this afternoon to be able to introduce to you Keith Kirsten. I'm sure he needs actually no introduction to any of you. Even I, who have never so much as pulled a weed out in my life, have watched many of Keith's shows. And so if you think about it, Keith was there doing gardening TV shows long before we had these lifestyle channels, and it had become, quite the norm that you would only watch cooking or watch gardening on TV and never actually do it yourself. So Keith really is a household name in South Africa. He was on television right from the start when it was first introduced in South Africa in the mid-70s. He continued to be on TV and radio for 30 years. He's written, as you know, many books. One of those books, Keith Kirsten's Gardening, has sold more than 100,000 copies. So he really is a gardening with Keith Kirsten. He really is a legend in South Africa. And just before we started, he was telling me that he recently helped Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu and his wife Leah do their garden at their retirement home in Hermanus. So he continues to do exciting things. So, welcome. Welcome. Thank you so much for making the time. We know you're incredibly busy, and we've been trying to get Keith to come to summer school for a long time, and his own agenda's never made that possible. Well, we've wanted to, and so we're immensely grateful to him for being here. So he's going to talk for about 50 minutes, take some questions at the end, and then apparently there are some handouts when you leave. So don't feel that you have to take too many notes, but yeah, let's have an engaging afternoon.
Where do you want it there? Is that all right, or do you want it the other way? So where's the thing when you're going to do it? You can put it like that. Are you going to do it like that? Okay, cool. And you can just plug it into my belt there. Okay, good. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm very grateful that the university did invite me. When I did arrive in the director's office earlier today, she said to me, we didn't think you'd ever accept to come, so, and why not? And presumably most of you are gardeners or are interested in gardens. And of course, they would ask me to come to Cape Town when you're in the worst drought in living history and talk about gardening. A few questions I have for you just to get going. Demographics. How many of you are swallows who come in only for this time of the year in sunny South Africa when we have, I hope you're only bathing once a week and conserving water. Bring some of yours with you next time. Anyway, in the beginning, we're going to be talking about where gardening began, because I think it's going to give us a kind of a concept of where we're going and what we need to do in the future. And if you thought that gardening would be the same as it used to be, you've got to change your minds about it or take a Prozac, one or the other, but it's going to be different. I'm going to talk a bit about the history of gardening and the various art forms, and then we're going to get on to serious sustainable gardening and real examples of gardens, particularly ones in the Cape. How many of you are from outside of Cape Town? Quite a few of you. And small gardens, large gardens, Somerset West is Cape Town. I want to know if you've come from the Eastern Cape or Johannesburg or whatever. Yeah. Well, even Johannesburg have still got their water restrictions and haven't been lifted. We had fabulous rains after a year of drought, serious drought. And we also had serious restrictions, not as bad as here yet, but we are also having a dicey middle of summer now where it's raining and sort of localized and not enough. So our droughts will return. And then I've got lists of plants. So don't despair. What I have got for you here are 6 pages that you'll be able to collect. And, at the top there's one for everyone. One is on something I'm going to read now. One is the concept of gardens from the past. One is on still that and where gardening all began. And then a list of very nice plants, A to Z. And I'm not a plant Nazi. I don't mind exotic plants as well as indigenous. I get criticized a little in the Cape, with my purist friends who only have indigenous plants, but there are such things as Mediterranean plants that are good and not invasive, that come from either Australia or California or the south of France or wherever. We sell some of our hybrid agapanthus in the south of France. You go to the Hollywood and look at the Hollywood homes around Los Angeles, and you'll see that they've all got standard plumbagos spilling out. I went to Australia years ago, and I've never seen more clivias in any other country, even South Africa, than what I've seen in the gardens around Sydney and other parts of Australia and New Zealand. So, some of the countries around the world were doing better things with our indigenous plants than we were doing here, because we were all fixed on the hydrangeas and the lavender and the, all those kind of things. And then in the Bailey's, or the RHS dictionary, I should say, of gardening, in 1992, I wrote the history of gardening in South Africa, and it's in that encyclopedia. So if you go to the RHS dictionary of gardening, you'll see the piece on the history of gardening since it's been going in South Africa in this excerpt. And these are all for you to take home later. And I have to have my notes because that's the way I keep on track. So that we've done. Then we're going to get to, I'm going to read this to you because it kind of makes you really realize what we have been doing in South Africa and the rest of the world, for that matter, whether it be the UK, Australia, America. There's beautiful English gardens outside New York that you'd think that you were in England. So people can perfect it. And wherever the colonials went, and that's a bad word in this university, bless our forefathers' cotton socks, whether they were German, Portuguese, French, English, Irish, or whatever. But that's history, which we're going to learn about. But if we go back to the English conquered the world, the modern world, or the more modern world, and wherever we went, we made English country gardens in New Zealand and Australia, and the 5 most common plants worldwide 10 years ago was mondo grass, lavender, box hedging of any form, and poodle or lollipop plants. Camellias in the cold climates, and crab apples, and in the warm climates, hibiscus and Sheena's gold, and you all know it. Some people have poodled their gardens to hell. I mean, lollipops everywhere. I mean, if you really want to see real beautiful topiary work, go to some of the ancient gardens of England or even in Italy. So that's it. Now, talking about my subject today makes me think of Stephen Anderton, who's a great gardener and lecturer in the UK, and he's also an actor, first and foremost, and then didn't make money in acting. It's a tough life in England, and he does wonderful gardening, and he writes in the London papers. And Stephen Anderson said that gardening is rather like making love in a telephone booth. He said, you don't quite know where to begin and where to end. And, gardeners love plants, and I'm more a plantsman than a designer, although I do a lot of design work today as well, and studied it. But I love plants. So I see ladies come into the garden centre and they buy a whole trolley load of plants, and I say, where are you going to put that? Oh, I don't know, I just like the look of them. When I get home, I'll find a spot, we'll stick it in, and you end up with a fruit salad. So I've found out how many of you are out of town. Small, large properties? Are we in smaller properties these days than large, maybe? Small and large. Small, okay. People have favorite colors in gardening. Some people gardening entirely in containers because that's easier to manage, and it's in a small townhouse garden or retirement village or whatever. Christopher Lloyd hated roses. It's a free world. You can love or hate whatever you like. People hate cannas. 10, 20 years ago, you couldn't buy an aloe in a garden centre, and no one wanted aloes. They were those things that grew out in the veldt. And now everyone's running to garden centres to look for indigenous, water-wise, hardy, beautiful plants that belong to South Africa. People have favourite colours. Christopher Lloyd in England at Great Dixter hated his mother's roses. He pulled them out the moment she died and planted a tropical garden with, all the sort of tropical leaves of aralias and, all those kind of things, even though they died in winter. Cannas, because they die in winter, but they grow beautifully in the summer. And he has a whole kind of exotic grass come big leafed elephant's ears and whatever, and they just cover them, or so many of them are bulbous and they come up again, and that's in one of the areas of the garden at Great Dixter, which was a rose garden. John Brooks, the Kramer's garden designer in England, who really created more interest in formal gardening as opposed to formal gardening, when everyone else was doing boxed hedges and roses and all that kind of stuff, and he hated and loathed rhododendrons, and we go to England and we see beautiful rhododendrons, we love them. And so it's a free world, and as I say, if you don't like it, take a Prozac. And then there's variegated plants. I've got a friend in Balgowan, in Natal, in the Midlands, and he absolutely abhors a variegated plant. God forbid he's got variegated ivy or variegated, myrtus or a variegated viburnum or anything like that. He wants it all green, all green. And leaves. Who rakes leaves on lawns? They stopped doing it in Kensington Gardens and in Hyde Park long ago. They just got a mulcher thing that goes on pathways through that big park. They don't rake up leaves anymore. We all everything's pristine in our garden. It's got to be clipped to buggery, and we've got to do everything formal. And men like formal gardening. They like everything to be clipped and perfect. God forbid there's a plant with a few leaves falling off it. I helped a lady, a friend's wife, with a garden in Johannesburg, and she said, "Oh, I don't want a pond. It's going to bring frogs." God, Vincent Carruthers is one of my best friends, who wrote the book on frogs of South Africa. And then she said, "No, and don't bring a tree that's losing its leaves. I want evergreen." I said, "But what about it? This is going to be cold on this patio in the summer, in the cold Johannesburg." Didn't want any leaves. And then we planted an evergreen magnolia, a lovely little dwarf one. And it started dropping because they do it. There's no such thing as an evergreen. They all at some time of the year drop their foliage. Privets do it, which you're not allowed to plant anymore, but magnolia. So the moment the magnolia dropped leaves, she rang me and said, "Keith, I don't want this magnolia, it's dropping leaves." I said, "It's only for like 1 week. And you've got a gardener, he'll clean them up." People we're terribly particular. We want everything perfect. Didn't want to attract birds because they'll poop on the stoop. You've got to get with it. But I said, I said to her husband, he's a good friend of mine, I said, put her in a glass cage. She'll be much happier, and wherever I go, people tell me about the problems of gardening. There are baboons, at Betty's Bay. And yes, they come down and whatever. We've got to learn. I've got porcupines in my garden. I've got a small farm on the Crocodile River outside north of Joburg. And I've got porcupines that dig up. I planted all Watsonias, winter and summer flowering ones and whatever, and dioramas, and a whole lot of bulbous plants. And they dug them up the first night. Now I've persevered because also they split them. And more come up, crocosmias and things like that. So, they multiply them for you. And all those kind of things. And then we'll get on to a few things. And, a lady asked in one of my garden centres during the time I was working on the floor in the garden centres, she said, "Do you have any mozzarella?" Excuse me? You'd be surprised what people ask for in a garden centre. When the lady saw a pineapple in a garden centre in America once, she said, "I didn't know pineapples grew on plants." I don't know where she thought they grew or came from. And I loved it when people walked into the garden centre and they'd say to their husband, "Darling, they make them in all these colours." Because there was the violas or whatever, And then a lady walked into a garden centre in New Zealand. And in New Zealand, if anyone knows New Zealand, our amaryllis velotta species, the pink one, comes up like a weed along the roadsides and in various places. They've naturalised there. And they come up, and as you know, they come up with the blooms and no leaves. And they sell them in garden centres, and you all know an amaryllis. So they sell the amaryllis and the velotta species there, your March lilies and whatever, and they are known as naked ladies. And she walked in and said, "Do you have any naked ladies?" And the little man clerk behind the counter said, "The day ain't out yet, ma'am, but we don't have any now." And Alan Titchmarsh, if you're from England, he's always at Chelsea Flower Show, and a lady asked him and said that her rose wasn't doing very well. And he said, "Well, give it the odd prune." A year later, she said, "I've got a bone to pick with you." He said, "I gave it a whole tin of prunes and didn't do anything." These are true stories, I have to tell you. And I have to tell you that droughts will repeat themselves. So every one of you, when you go home today, are going to go and you're going to put a tank in your garden. You have to. Who's got a tank in your garden? Gee, a lot of you. Fabulous. And when did you put them in? In the last couple of years? Yes. You know, we have to conserve water here. Your people are just flowing in here and whatever. But this is what it's about. God, some of you might know this already. It's a little discussion between God and St. Francis. Do you know it? Some of you know it? Okay. I'm going to read it quickly because it's really what it's all about at the end of the day. And then we're going to go into the interesting stuff. And we'll tell you about the fynbos of the Cape and show you some lovely slides. God says, St. Francis, you know all about gardens and nature. What in the world is going on down there on earth? What happened to the dandelions, the violets, the thistles, and the stuff I started eons ago? I had a perfect no-maintenance garden plan. Those plants grow in any soil, withstand drought, and multiply with abandon. The nectar and the long-lasting blossoms attract butterflies, birds, and bees, and flocks of songbirds. I expected to see a vast garden of colour by now. All I see are these green triangles. I hate lawns. It's one of my new passions. And yet, if you've got a lovely green lawn and you've got the water, no issue. But I don't like lawns. They're water guzzlers, and they're no good in a South African dry garden. God says, St. Francis says, it's the tribes that settled there, Lord. The suburbanites, they started calling your flowers weeds, and they went to great lengths to kill them and replace them with grass. The truth is that people bought from the Transvaal and wherever, at Langebaan, they took out the fynbos and they planted kikuyu and some roses. They did do it 10 years ago or more. Real examples. God says grass, but it's boring, not colourful. It doesn't attract butterflies, birds and bees, only grubs and earthworms. And it's temperamental with temperatures. Do these suburbanites really want all that grass growing there? St. Francis says, apparently so, Lord. They go to great pains to grow it, keep it green, and then they begin each spring to fertilize by fertilizing the grass and poisoning any other plant that crops up in the lawn. And God says the spring rains and the warm weather will make the grass grow really fast. That must make the suburbanites very happy. St. Francis says, apparently not, Lord. As soon as it grows a little, they cut it, sometimes twice a week. God said they cut it. Do they bale it like hay? St. Francis says, not exactly, Lord. Most of them rake it up and they put it in bags. They bag it. Why? Is it a cash crop? Do they sell it? St. Francis says, no, sir. The opposite. They pay to throw it away. And God says, now let me get this straight. They fertilize the grass to grow it, and when it does grow, they cut it off and they pay to throw it away. St. Francis says, yes, sir. The suburbanites must be relieved, God says, in summer when we cut back on the rain and we turn up the heat. That surely slows the growth and saves them a lot of work. God says, these suburbanites must be relieved. St. Francis says, you aren't going to believe this, Lord. When the grass stops growing so fast, they drag out the hoses and they pay money to water it, so that they can continue to mow it and pay to get rid of it. God says, what nonsense. At least they kept some of the trees. That was a stroke of genius, if I do say so myself. The trees must grow in the spring and provide beauty and shade in the summer. And in the autumn, they fall to the ground and form a natural blanket to keep the moisture in the soil and protect the trees and bushes. Plus, as they rot, the leaves form compost to enhance the soil. It's a natural cycle of life. St. Francis says, you better sit down, Lord. The suburbanites have drawn a new circle. As soon as the leaves fall, they rake them into piles and they pay to haul them away. Hopefully you're putting them on your compost. No, God says. What do they do to protect the shrub and the tree roots in the winter and to keep the soil moist and loose? St. Francis says, after throwing away the leaves, they go out and they buy something they call mulch. And they haul it home and they spread it around in place of the leaves. And God says, oh, and where do they get this mulch? St. Francis says they cut down the trees and they grind them up and make the mulch. God says, enough. I don't want to think about this anymore. St. Catherine, you're in charge of the arts. What movie are you scheduled for us tonight? St. Catherine says, Dumb and Dumber, Lord. It's a real stupid movie about, God says, never mind. I've just learned the whole story from St. Francis. Anyway, so that says it all. We've got big lawns, sometimes in small gardens. We overpave. Our swimming pools are blue. Who's got a black swimming pool or a charcoal swimming pool? You've got one. Are you husband and wife? Good. Yeah. No, that's okay. I was going to give you 2 books. There's a book for you. That's a good answer. Okay, who's got a proper eco? Sorry, it's a present, yes. Well, you think I'm selling it? I'm not allowed to sell books here anyway. It's a present. What about eco pools? Real eco pools with a pond with all the nice water plants and the papyrus grasses and all that, filtering the water that goes back into your swimming pool. Do you know that chlorine is illegal in America? You're not allowed to have a chlorine swimming pool. It's poison. And who's got a salt swimming pool? It's probably yours. Good. Well, we're getting there, even though they're a lot of maintenance in a way. So there we go. Here in the Cape Floristic region, and I'm going to just read 3 parts of this, the Cape Floral Kingdom is the smallest of 6 floral kingdoms in the world. It is the only one contained in its entirety within a single country. It is characterized by its high richness in plant species, 8,700 species, and its high endemicity. 68% of the plant species are confined to the Cape Floral Kingdom. The Cape Floral Kingdom compares with some of the richest floras worldwide, surpassing many tropical regions in its floral diversity. In South Africa, over 1/3 of all plant species, 1/3 of all plant species occur in the Cape Floral Kingdom. That is a phenomenal number of wildflowers here. And daily, with the expansion of Cape Town, with the expansion of all sorts of things everywhere, industry, housing developments, they are being absolutely destroyed. And in fact, the biggest number of plant species on the red data list are confined right here in the Cape. And then fynbos is the name given to the hard-leafed shrublands and heartland found in the coastal plains and mountains of southwestern and southern Cape of southern Africa. The name is derived from the Dutch word, as you know, called fynbos, spelled F-I-J-N, bush, meaning fine-leafed bush, and is the term given to the collection of plants that is a vegetation type. Fynbos is the major component of the Cape Floristics region, which includes renosterveld, which is everything you see right down here, even in the Cape Flats and around Kuils River and going out to the west coast. That's all renosterveld, and as well as Koroid shrubland, which is more Karoo, semi-succulent stuff, and then various thickets types and even forests. Actually fall in, even if they're in ravines, in wetter areas, they are all under the species of fynbos. Fynbos has very high species diversity, with more than 7,000 species crammed into just 46 square kilometers, 46,000 square kilometers at the southern western tip of Africa. And hopefully you're going to see a lot of these, and a lot of them are contained in the list I'm giving you, and I'm sure there's some experts here who have got and belong to the Kirstenbosch branch of the Botanical Society and know all these things and go to Kirstenbosch regularly and are up to date with all this stuff. But this is just to try and encourage you, if you live in the Cape, to go the fynbos route. And especially if you don't have water availability and you cannot grow camellias and whatever. Clivias are water-wise, even though they need the shade and even though they absorb moisture with their roots, they store it. In fact, they need a dry spell to flower well. People say my clivias aren't doing very well. I bet they're wet, too wet. They need a dry spell prior. As soon as they form the buds, they need a dry spell to push those buds out. So we overwater. More gardens have actually been overwatered. Even now during the drought, people who've got boreholes, I see them wasting water, with lots of water. Now I'm going to ask you, and go to my next page because they're numbered. I'm going to talk, what do you conjure up when I talk sustainability? Give me some words that come under sustainable gardening. Sorry? Well, that's plants, vegetative plants, right? Plants. What else? Biodiversity, more than one variety. You can't garden and attract birds and butterflies and the good insects to eat the bad insects if you don't have diversity in your garden. So if you've got monoculture, which is why I don't like vast areas of lawn and just trees, or parklands, they can be very nice, but they need biodiversity. They need lots of plant species. I can't give you another book. Have you got any grandchildren? You got any grandchildren? I'll give you a book that Lynn Hurry, an educationist, and I did on gardening is fun. And most of my friends read that before they read anything else. It tells you how to make compost, soil types of South Africa. It's a children's book, how to grow carrots using the tops and avocados and all that kind of stuff. It's for children. But your grandchildren will love it, and you'll read it before you give it to them, I know. Give me another name for sustainable gardening. Yeah, but that's the water type. Drought resistant, yes, that's the plant. I want other words. Well, water-wise? What about organic? No pesticides. That's sustainable gardening. The more you spray with pesticides, the more you're killing the good things that actually make your plants grow better. You need a 3-year cycle of not spraying. You can't just do 1 year and say, oh, the bugs are still eating. You need to keep it going for 3 years where you don't spray. And then you'll see the bird life increase. You'll see the butterflies increase. You'll see all the good beneficial insects come back. You said biodiversity. That's why you got the book. And where did gardening begin? Where did gardening begin? Garden of Eden, yes, but you're getting close. And hanging gardens, yes. Where? In the Middle East. Middle East, got a book. You get a book. Okay. One of the handouts, it's a one-pager, tells you exactly where the garden started in the Islamic countries in the Middle East. That's where gardening started. 3,500 years before Christ. In the middle of a desert. In the middle of a desert was an oasis of a temple or an oasis home. The rill of water, the date palms, the olives, the irises, the herbs, the musk roses, all the stuff that really they needed in those days. And it was from underground water, so there's nothing wrong with boreholes and there's nothing wrong with underground supply, but not to water the whole country, you know. That was just for one dwelling in the middle of a desert. And if you look at Penelope Hobhouse's book, it says that the earliest gardens were oases in the desert of the Middle East. That's where gardening actually began. Long ago, the colonial gardens that we've done worldwide is an English thing, because the English perfected gardening, and they are mad gardeners. The French, not as mad, but if you go to Normandy and all those areas, influenced by the French, wonderful. And they had more temples and grottos and pavilions and things. And that's where the grand tours, the English went on the grand tours to France, and then they went home and they had to have a grotto in their garden. And it was one-upmanship. You know, you go to Starhead and you go to Painshill Park and all these places. Everyone was vying with one another. And there was Repton and Capability Brown, and they re-engineered rivers to make lakes in front of the mansion, or the palace, or the whatever. So, you know, gardening, and they went on grand tours. They brought these very Romanistic and French ideas and Italianate ideas to England. And that's where the fountains and the pavilions and the grottos and the bridges over streams and that all started. Otherwise, it was just beautiful, beautiful indigenous English bush, veld and grasslands. Other early gardens were recorded in the river cultures of Mesopotamia and Egypt. You see in the in the pyramids, you see the date palms, you see the water lilies, all there in the temples. Even as early as 2000 BC, the waters of the Euphrates, Tigris, and the Nile rivers were irrigating pleasure gardens as well as crops in Penelope. This is one of the most useful books to have on In Search of Paradise. We had the Gardens of Eden, but it's actually the Gardens of Paradise. It was the paradise gardens that were made in the Middle East in the deserts. And a lot of it came out of the Quran and the Eastern culture because it was integral to their beliefs. And has gone through religion right through all of religion worldwide. And in Penelope Hobhouse's book, there is a desert. I should have had it on here. There is a desert picture, and there is the oasis. In the middle of this vast desert stood this garden. And you can go on tours with various experts from the UK and all over the world who take people who are mad about Islamic, or not Islamic, but gardens of Persia. Some of them are not well kept anymore, some are beautifully kept, depending on the funds available. And you know that's how life is in South Africa too. Depends on the funds available to do these things. So there's the Paradise Garden. You know, as recorded in the Old Testament, the scripture common to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the Garden of Eden was identified with paradise. In the 7th century, Muslims expanded to this theme into the terrestrial gardens, intended to be foretaste of the celestial paradise to come. These gardens were laid out in 4 parts, divided by water rills and channels. The idea of a paradise garden spread to Spain in the 18th century and into India and the Mughals in the 16th century. And then, of course, if you go through this book of Penelope's, you know, from the Taj Mahal to the various Islamic temples, and you go to China and Japan. It was all over there before it came west, all over there. And then the British, all our forebears most probably, you know, went to New Zealand, went to Australia, went to America, went to South Africa and whatever, and they gardened the English way. And when I grew up, we mostly had informal gardens. Then there's been this real trend over the last 20 years, even at Chelsea Flower Show, to formal gardens. You know, lots of hedges and all that. Now, in the last 5 years at Chelsea Flower Show, this year at Chelsea Flower Show, there was one garden. It was a charity one, and it happened to need that piece of lawn, part of the actual philosophy of the charity. But there was only one garden at Chelsea out of 25 gardens that had any lawn in it. They don't have lawn. They had perennials and mulched walkways and gravel and some very nice, neatly done paving and flagstones. Old crazy pavings come back. It's a simple thing. Water grows in between the paving and goes down to the roots instead of plastering everywhere. Grouting brick paving should never happen. Bricks should be laid just like that. I'm jumping around. And so the formal trend, from formal to informal, has developed back again from the formal. 10 years ago at Chelsea Flower Show, there was a lot of hard paving. There was a lot of water rules and glass and stainless steel and all kinds of hard landscape materials brought into the landscapes. Designers love doing that. I always say they don't know enough about plants, so they give you more paving, more pots, more, you know, things like that, fountains or whatever. So it's come back sort of full circle. So in sustainable gardening, and we're going to talk about it, it should really be about designing a garden sustainably. If you have too much paving, sit in your garden. I say go to the bottom of your garden or your patio or whatever. Sit on a bench with your G&T. You should all have a lemon here. It's Mediterranean. They grow in this part of the world. Have a lemon for your G&T. Don't buy Mrs. Woolworths. I grow spinach because I told my housekeeper we're not buying spinach anymore from Mrs. Woolworths. We're growing our own. We grow it year-round. Just have a couple of those hoops and put over a polytunnel and grow your vegetables in it, even during the late autumn and early spring when it's still quite cold. Biodiversity, designing for sustainability, planting for sustainability. So don't plant something in your garden that's not suitable for your garden. Just don't. Just don't. Try and ignore it. Go to something that grows for you. I've never seen plumbago looking better than in this drought. You can't believe how that thing's just flourishing because it's got underground roots. It knows where the water is. And they survive as hedges just left. Unfortunately, people don't train their staff properly, or they don't realize they're amateur, and they go and cut it just when it's in full bud and about to flower. And they hedge it instead of just letting it. Yes, and you can tell me that plumbago will grow over everything else or whatever. That's the fun of gardening. Get out there and cut it and, you know, bring it back to where it should be. Eat sustainably. How many of you actually have a decent vegetable garden? Fantastic. Have you had a prize already? You've had a book. You've had a book. Who didn't have a book? All right, I'll give a few books away today. Did you have a book? No, you haven't. I'll give you a book. And I'll give one. Well, you see, I should really be giving someone further back. Who's really got a good vegetable garden? The lady with the glasses behind you. If you'd pass that back to her, please. And you guys here. So, you know, this is on 25 gardens of South Africa, and you'll see all kinds there. Fynbos gardens, forest gardens up in Mpumalanga, even the Durban Botanic Gardens and Kirstenbosch. Eat sustainably and then practice sustainably. Don't spray with pesticides. Use more compost. You know, you should have in spring you should have a whole pile of manure on your pavement or 10 bags in the garage ready for gardening. You can't garden without food. You take your vitamins. I'm damn sure. I took a vitamin C this morning. So feed your garden. Feed it. And make your own compost, all those kind of things. So you cultivate, and there's a whole thing about not cultivating soil going around at the moment. Do me a favor. If that ground cakes, you need to loosen it. You get air to the roots. When it does rain, or when you water with a watering system or drip irrigation, which is what you should be using if you are using irrigation, and you practice sustainability, but you cultivate, just loosening the surface of soil so the water can get down into the roots and go down. And then obviously you can mulch, and preferably you've made your own compost to mulch. You're not buying it if you don't have to. If you obviously don't have the space, then what's the odd bag or two of mulch that you bought when we've actually taken down alien invasive plants that have been chopped up. They're perfectly suitable for using as mulch in your garden. And deadheading plants. I get 3-4 flushes a year out of my roses just in the summer months, from spring through to, and we have cold winters where everything's just dead on my farm. And we get 4 flushes of my roses purely by immediately deadheading. And don't just cut the tips off, take them down about that far, and you'll get another flush on your roses. I know that people here don't want roses. I just understand that. Okay. So I want to show you some of these things. I've been through some of this stuff. And droughts, as I said, are going to repeat themselves. We've gone through the demographics, and you've gone through the various things, and we talked about sustainability. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background as to where gardening comes from. And I'm telling you now, gardening will never be the same as it used to be in the future, especially here in the Cape or any other dry area of the world where it gets like this. If you already look at Australia, they know about it. The best, and you talk about planting sustainably, if you don't have a tree, even in a townhouse garden, you're not gardening correctly. If you want to reduce the temperatures around your home, you plant trees. Men particularly have this thing about, God forbid, you're going to plant a tree too near the building and you're going to end up with cracking the walls of the pool or the house or the whatever. The roots go under those foundations, way below them. They're not going to do anything, unless it's an exotic fig or, there's these things called ficus natida that garden centres sold for years, and they got the most terrible root system. But if you plant a Dias cotonefolia, a pom-pom tree, or a Calpurnia that Cristopino used to love, a thing called Calpurnia, yellow flowers, you plant a small, a standard thing, a standard plant even in a courtyard. You look out of your kitchen windows, if you don't see greenery and some sort of plants, what do you want to look at a concrete wall for? We live with ugliness as our cities grow. We live with ugliness. And the Australians have got the best air conditions of the world around their houses, right up against the house. And those are the outdoor air conditioners. And it reduces the temperature. People say, well, it's going to make too much shade. Well, if you're in a cold climate, you have a deciduous tree that loses its leaves in winter, you get lots of sun. And if you're in a warm climate, then what's wrong with a nice tree growing? Harpophyllum or Cape Essenhout or something like that. It reduces the temperature. So you need to plant sustainably. And I'm going to go through some of these slides because they really do show the examples of what you can do. And in the Cape here, I do believe that you should be planting more indigenous. Every garden should have at least, except for the purists who want only indigenous, that's fine. And you can really, and I'll show you some, you can have complete indigenous gardens. Complete. And with the trees and the shrubs and all of that feinboss stuff is all there. It's in trees, it's in shrubs, it's in ground covers, it's in perennials and repeat flowering things. And yes, you've got to trim them and cut them every now and again. But you certainly need to garden sustainably by designing sustainably. If you go to the bottom of your garden, you sit and have that G&T and you look back at your garden, it will tell you that I need more sun here if it's too shady, or I need more shade there. I've got too much paving. If it gets hot, the temperature on a patio that's not got a couple of trees around it, will be 4 degrees to 5 degrees hotter than if you just stepped off the paving and walked onto the lawn about 30 yards away. 5 degrees. Try it. Take a temperature. Take it. Go. It's amazing. And if you have trees around your home, you would not have your ground drying out so quickly. You'd conserve the moisture. You'd keep the water in there longer. And you'd create shade for Macaea bella, Plectranthus, and Clivias, and all the other lovely shade-loving things that will thrive in there. And you wouldn't even have to water them as much because they're in the shade instead of burning. I have a little place at Zevenwacht, and I see a neighbour of mine in the old original estate there, lovely big trees and heritage stone pines, and I see the Clivias burning up at the moment because they're on the edges where they're getting too much sun. And they could be under the trees and flourishing even now in the drought. And we've got, even our boreholes there have we been switched off now. We only get it once every second week to use the taps that are linked to the borehole and the tanks that store the water from the borehole. So I'm going to show some more. So there's a handout on the concept of a paradise garden, just to give you some of the background and the history to that. The map of all the gardens in the Islamic states or in that Middle East area. A 4-page, I think 1, 2, 3 pages, A to Z of a plant list for you, and the RHS thing. for you to when you do go. I want to go through these slides now, and I've been told how to do this. You can see that this tells you where you've got to garden differently. There's no water there. Now there's no water here because of the population, mainly. All the dams and all the farmers around Elgin and Stellenbosch and up in those areas, they've all got water. They're natural dams. Some of them are natural dams, some are man-made dams, but they've got lots of water. Elgin, all those farmers around, the apple farmers, they've all got water. The water problem is in Cape Town, where there is no water. And Table Mountain, the dams are full. We saw a slideshow given by Adam Harrower from Kirstenbosch the other day, and the dams there are going to fill up, and they've just been filling up with these recent little bits of rain. So there's water around, but there's just no water in the town because everyone's building and everyone's planting the wrong plants sometimes and whatever. And then then you've got all your different areas where you can and can't plant. When it's tropical and you live, even Mpumalanga has its droughts. Even the northern areas have their droughts. And we're going to talk about the history of gardening and hand out, I've sort of moved this along already, History and Origins of Gardening globally. It's there. And if you look in Penelope Hobhouse's book, you'll see as well that besides the beginning in Asia and continental Europe and England and North America, where it all spread to, there's water in the garden, which is pure water gardens. There's ecological gardening. There's nature in the city. If you go into the middle of New York, they've got their Millennium Park, all beautiful prairie plants and grasses and perennials. Mediterranean gardens, you see beautiful Mediterranean gardens along the south of France and in Italy. Tropical gardens, the influence of Roberto Bell Marx from California. Desert gardens, naturally dry. Materials matter, fire and water, recycled and found, glass in the garden, individual vision. And gardening is an art form. So my story to you is not to stop gardening. You must garden. You must make beautiful gardens, but do them according to your size of your garden, the soil type, the climate you're living in. And if you don't have enough trees, you need trees. And we don't want to look at walls. We don't want to look at walls. I hate looking at a wall. Why? Why do we look at walls? Shrubs screen walls, not climbers, by the way. Climbers grow up and grow over, and your neighbors enjoy them. You really, if you want it to grow on the inside of a wall, internal wall in your garden, that's okay. But on your boundaries, they grow up in the trees, they get in your electric fences, they shrub screen walls. And there's lovely indigenous shrubs, which you'll look at just now. I'm going to move this along. Design is important. If you don't have the right design, I'm not saying you're going to go out and get an expert designer, just you'll know. Reduce your paving. Take up paving. I've got an old-fashioned swimming pool. You'll see it. And I just took out all the paving around it and took the lawn right to the edge. And I do have a lawn, by the way. And I'm reducing it. I'm reducing it daily. But I live on a farm, and it was a sheep paddock. The actual farmer had his sheep everywhere, and knew nothing about gardening. So we've tamed that area around the house. But the design is important. Less paving, more trees, no walls. Hide them. Prepare your soil right in the beginning. If you've got to redo a garden or a bed, redo it properly. Use bone meal. We only use on our landscape sites bone meal and compost and mulch when we want to do pathways. You'll see some of them. But we use only bone meal. It's a natural thing. It doesn't burn. I see so many plants. They plant new roses and the thing's burnt. The leaves are all going brown on the edges, not from the heat, from fertilizer. Too much fertilizer, too much feeding. We overfeed. It must be diluted. Okay, on the design, these are lawns that we're going to be taking out soon on an estate up in Paradise Cliff area. We're taking that out. We're taking all that lawn out. It's going to become a fynbos garden of proteas, pin cushions, coleonema, confetti bushes, dioramas in between. Beautiful fynbos. Put back what was there originally. And those are agapanthus that will be divided up and interplanted with all the other fynbos, because that's monoculture. Those agapanthus, wherever they are, there's a whole bed of agapanthus there. They are monoculture. You don't want, why have just a bed of agapanthus? If it's a pavement garden, nothing wrong with just some agapanthus there, but don't have them all over the rest of the place if you want to get biodiversity into your garden, because biodiversity is going to give. They're trees. These are stinkwood trees. Celtis africana, the South African one, not the exotic. If you've got a small garden and you've got an exotic stinkwood tree from China, take it out now already. You've still got lots of time, believe me. We'll be all around a long time still. And you plant another tree. Just get a decent one in 100 litre or 200 litre, you know. And at our ages, you've earned that kind of thing, you know. So look at that. Those trees are, how many meters? That's 1, 2, 3 meters. The house is standing, not got a crack in it. This is an old bungalow farm that I've fixed up. And okay, I'm privileged to have 350-year-old Vaderlands Wilks Combritum willows in the back garden. This is a courtyard. When I came to this house, this courtyard was just lawn, kikuyu lawn, believe it or not, the ubiquitous weeping mulberry in the middle, some cannas and roses around the edge, and it was a lawn. They schlepped in a bit of a lawn. This is quite a big courtyard. It's twice that size. It goes to the width, left-hand side as well. And I've just put gravel. And that's anthuricum, which is one of the wild hen and chickens. They're all now called anthuricums. They're not called chlorophytum anymore. And that's it. And I put 2 magnolias. And yes, they do. See, they lose leaves. So what? We break them up on the gravel. And the pathways are made just in the areas where we walk. And that's Virginia creeper, because I don't like walls. And people say, oh, how can you put it? Well, spiders are going to come in the house. We get the odd spider in the house. It's not a pain in the neck, you know. Nothing a can of doom can't do. If it's inside the house, I've got frogs at the back of my wine boxes, you know, my wine cubbyholes. And they go in there to hibernate during the winter. I have no issue. They pop through the house every now and again, but they go in the door and out the back door, whatever. They don't, you know, we find the odd one in a slipper, but it's not going to kill you, you know. This here, I'm showing this on purpose. This is behind my garden, and that there was bone dry, and the white ants had eaten it to nothing. I didn't have time to look for it, but I could have shown you this picture from 12 months ago. It was just sand. Bare, felt that it had been eaten to the ground with white ants everywhere. Real termites, I should say, not white ants. Well, they are white ants. Termites. And this is 1 year later since the nice rains we had this summer. And now we're watching it carefully because we are going back into these little bits of not getting the same rainfall as usual. But it's amazing how nature does look after itself. And I think nature is forgiving. I do believe this drought will break and we'll have another 5 years of good gardening and you won't even think there was a drought again. But you've got to remember, it will come back again. Well, I like hares, and I think the odd sculpture. But, you know, I went to a garden once when I was still 20-something in Pretoria when I'd finished studying, and I went up to see a garden in Waterkloof Heights or Waterkloof Ridge in Pretoria, and I went to visit people for dinner. They were very kind to students, and I walked up into that garden. There were more people in that garden than there were in the house. There was a Diana, and there was a Venus de Milo with Afarim, and you know there were so many statues in that garden. I mean, and fountains and things. You'd have thought that you were in Versailles or Medici Palace or something. You know, this is a little area which I'm converting into a bird garden, a wild bird garden. It's got yarrow, you know, elk. What is that thing called? Yarrow. Anyway, and the little wild asters. And I've got some red-leafed cannas in there, and my garden has just forgotten there. But I take the flowers off. I don't like the flowers. I like the leaves. And those are Aloe coming up there. And this is the wild Scabiosa, the wild Africanus, Scabiosa africanus. And it's just a wild bird garden, but, you know, I like that. It's wild and woolly, and it's got, you know, it attracts the birds. You should see the birds in the grass garden. This is a thing called salvia, and it's as tough as old nails, winter and summer. It gives glorious color. It's a Mediterranean plant. Doesn't come from South Africa, but it's beautiful. Jenny Ferreira from Klein Optenhorst out at Wellington, when she lived there, she introduced a pure white one of these. There it is in between. And grasses. And just pathways cut. And I like these poppies. They kind of go a little bit wild, but then, you know, it's not an issue. And we just sow those from seed. We collect the seeds. We wait until the seeds are, you know, have dried before we harvest them again. And then I just mow. And you can see that lawn. It's no fine, perfect lawn. It's full of clover. It's full of odd weeds and dandelions and things. And we just cut it down and make a pathway through it. I'm slowly reducing every bit of lawn around my house. This is lawn when you've got shade and when you get this kind of weather, you must mow your lawn higher. It's going to burn and it doesn't dry out as quickly, especially in the shade. Mow it, leave it higher. And especially if you've done a seed grass, they germinate based on the amount of, and they flourish growth-wise on the amount of grass foliage is there. And so I try and do different levels of grass. Sorry? Well, it's a bit of Mrs. Strilly Oppenheimer wouldn't like me for it. She always moans. It is a GMO, I think. It's shade over or all seasons evergreen. You buy it from Mayford's in the bucket, but it's very good in the shade. If you're in a subtropical climate, you can use the LM grass, or what we used to call Berea. You know, it's a broad-leafed tropical grass, very good for, and indigenous to the Natal coasts and all that sort of thing. And shade areas in Mpumalanga, you know, Nelspruit, all that area. And if you've got even a frost-free garden here in the Cape and you have enough water, you can grow it here perfectly well. Because it's a shade grass, it won't do well in the sun anyway. This is a Ficus sycamoris. This is the sycamore fig. Isn't that just a fabulous tree? Now, who would not want a tree in their garden? I mean, this is my nephew who does things for BBC and National Geographic. He's out there in Kenya somewhere. But that's just a gorgeous fig tree. I couldn't help but put it into. So that a tree is a fabulous thing. And we don't have enough of them around our cities and our homes and our townhouse complexes and whatever. You know, and common areas have never got enough trees in them. If you haven't got enough space in your own garden, plant it in the common area if you're in a complex. And go and get on the gardening committee and create hell at the board. You know, that's a kippersol. This is 5 kilometers from my house in Joburg North. And that's in the cradle of humankind, up in the cradle. That's Highveld. That's God's garden. Those things are hundreds of years of age, if not 1,000 years of age. And that one there, that same, when we had the drought last year, they had a fire going through here that absolutely demolished those Cassonias, spicata, paniculata, and I thought we'd never see them in foliage again. And that's nature rebounding. Those things were burnt to smithereens. In fact, it was only in November, December. We had no rain, hadn't rained, and then the rains came. So actually it wasn't December, it was winter last year, end of winter. So it would have been 6 months ago from now, 7 months ago. These things were dead. This is a garden that we're going to be working on. That's ivy. Ivy is a noxious weed. It's on the one list with the Department of Environmental Affairs. And Cape Town's full of it. I had to smile the other day because I was with a client and he drove and he said, "What's this over here?" He didn't know any. I said, "That's ivy." He said, "Oh, it's quite pretty." I said, "Yeah, well, you don't know. It's going to all come out." But anyway, it's all coming out, and we're going to plant clivias and plant more of these natural olives and put clivias and plectranthus, really the wild species, not the hybrids, plectranthus, back into this area. And crocosmias and other things that will grow well there. But ivy is again monoculture. When you could have biodiversity growing in many sorts underneath there that give a really attractive garden instead of ivy. This is a pool that doesn't have any paving around it. And, you know, why have paving? You can't get into a swimming pool all the way around. You can only get in from one place. But we have Kyle Army racetrack around all our swimming pools. Why do we have racetracks around our swimming pools? Too much paving. Take it out. Take it out. Put a deck in if you have to, but not the whole way around. But you can only get in. I've kept this little bit of paving just here. And I like African pots. I've been through that phase where I don't want something Medici urn here or something, you know. It's wild. I'm trying to make it more. And this grass is going to diminish, believe me. And that's a salt chlorinated pool. Because the next step is to go the whole ecological route, which I might now do, because the salt doesn't always work as well. And I don't know what that is now. I can look here. Oh, that's another shot. This is what I'm talking about. This is what you can be doing in sunny areas around Cape Town and in your own gardens, no matter how small they are. That's just a mulched pathway with wood chips. Restios, lovely restios. Dioramas in flower there. The pink dioramas are in flower. The restios, there's dioramas there. Those little angels, fishing rods, harebells, gazanias, all the dimorphoticas, felicias. And this is not Mediterranean plant. That's a Mediterranean plant, but it's hardy. It's teucrium. You know, oh no, that's Stubby. That's Stubby. But you're seeing all the different feinbos things. And that's just looking out from Cavalli at Somerset West, between Somerset West and Stellenbosch. And it was, prior to this, just all, you know, grass. What's happened? There must be a missing page. This is Carissa. along the edge there. If you've got a pavement or you want something really tough and hardy, the Carissa, the Num Num, with the Natal plum, with its little white star-shaped flowers, and it's got thorns on it as well. It's good for keeping people off your pavement if you don't want them there. But, plant that along, and it can be trimmed as well. Don't hedge it or lollipop it. Just trim it when you need to. Those are old oaks that are being replaced because of historic reason with more new oaks and some Turkish oaks. Turkish oaks are far better in taking the Cape condition if you need an oak tree in your garden. Here again, we've got ericas, and we've got Peligula, the little one called Little Petite, is a wonderful dwarf Peligula, blowcuppy, as Christa Pinot used to call it, and buchus. All the different buchus are fabulous in a garden, in a fynbos garden. And these Felicias have finished flowering in the front. And wild rosemary and all that kind of stuff. So there we have it. And in the front there's Delospermum cooperi or Leidenbergiensis gazanias. And again, look there, you can see clearly the mulch pathway. Are those coming out all right? I can't see it. Yeah. No, you can see that that's wood chip and not gravel. But again, gravel would also work. Gravel will also work. Here's wild rosemary and hemzigia and ground cover cooperas along the front, and pelargoniums. I love pelargoniums, the wild one. There's the wild one growing around Camps Bay and all around Cape Town, cucullatum with the purple pink flowers. I mean, that's a gorgeous thing, and they're easy. Just when they get a bit straggly, cut them back, take the tops that much, and stick them back in the ground. They'll grow, and just get young plants coming back, because in nature, that's how they regenerate themselves. I've got to shoot. This is the kind of thing we can do in a shady area by just channeling water on a property using gum poles. If you've got problems growing things under trees, use the logs to make a bed, a garden or a planter around a tree. Just raise and get more soil in there. The problem is sometimes the roots come up, but you could put plastic in, punch some holes in that plastic, let the water through, and plant in that. Rather than building a wall or doing that. Here's Neisner ferns growing in here, and of course this has got some tropical wild asparagus. There's one called Mazeppa. It comes from Mazeppa Bay in the Transkei, and it grows flat on the ground, and it's called asparagus Mazeppa. And that's a nice silver-leafed yellowwood growing in there. Plectranthus. They're such lovely. That's one of the real native species, the indigenous ones in the front foreground there with the pink, pale pink. And those are all just Plectranthus garden all the way through there in the shade. And grasses and stachys, lamb's ear, blue salvia, some of the irises in the back there, and limonium, which is the new name for statice, the purple statice. That has to be one of the most rewarding Mediterranean plants. And yes, they get scraggly after a while. Pull them out, and the garden centers do need some business, so go and buy another one. You know what I mean? That's a little dwarf yellow form of confetti bush. It's a lovely little dwarf form of the yellow confetti bush available. And in the front, limonium with the purple flowers, and wild garlic, and Raphiolepis, one of my favorite plants because it's just so versatile. The Indian hawthorn, those are the glossy leafed shrubs in the background. And confetti bushes. I love confetti bushes. They grow everywhere in South Africa. You can plonk one in Nelspruit, Tzaneen, Joburg, Durban, or here, and they'll grow. They're what I call versatile plants. And Raphiolepis, Indian hawthorn's one, myrtle, which comes from the islands of Ischia in Italy. That's a wonderful thing. Takes the wind, with the fine foliage. This is down at Ellerman House. These are Aloe-thrascias, the wonderful one that grows right on the beach kind of thing. This is a garden not in Millennium Park in New York, but this is in Chicago. A beautiful garden sponsored and donated by a wealthy family there. And it looks terrible now, but that was in autumn, late autumn, last year. This is Cavalli, Pride of Madeira. It's a Mediterranean plant. If you've got a big enough garden, have Pride of Madeira in there. As you can see, we've used a lot of statice. If you have to leave early, I'll try and finish, and then we're going to have 10 minutes of questions. This is a swale, an area where it does get perennial water in the winter when it rains, but it's got Wachendorfias in there, and arum lilies, even some daylilies. Daylilies are a very rewarding exotic plant that's hardy and a good water-wise plant as well. using rocks if you can, but that's all fynbos. It's going away from the colonial look of lavender and hydrangeas and oak trees and, all that kind of thing. The oak trees are there, but it's fynbos, reintroducing that, far better for the wildlife. There's Wachendorfia in full flower, the yellow. And there's some low anthericums in the front there, and young confetti bushes. I'm going to try and shoot through these. This is just to show you that this is the way you can have a garden. If you had to rip up your lawn in a garden and say somewhere in Cape Town where you've got no water, rip up the lawn, get it out, put in lots of compost, bone meal, cultivate it, make mulch pathways through it like you saw in the earlier slide, and plant fynbos. You'll never look back. The garden will always look good on a little bit of water. This plant right in the foreground is my favorite new plant, and I've been using it for 10 years now, and it's Zyzigium pondoensis. It's South Africa's answer to a box hedge, if you want to. That hedges beautifully, or it grows to a small tree or large shrub about that big. And it's just the most beautiful glossy-leafed evergreen shrub. Zyzigium pondoensis. It comes from Pondoland. It's native to that area, and it's called Zyzigium pondoensis. It's an Sygygium, Zyzigium. It's on your list. It'll be on your plant list. You're getting one. And I haven't put always the common names in, but you could do Google today. You just Google the name, it'll come up, and you can see the plant on Google. That's that little Leidenbergiensis, some people call it Cooperi. It's not a Zyzigium, it's a Delospermum. Pincushions, Strelitzia regina. In the old apartheid era, we hated the Strelitzias because they reminded us interflora with their 3 Strelitzias in a vase, One up there, one in the middle, and one there. And then they stuck some anthuriums in it, and you paid lots of money for a real cuck bloody flower arrangement. And so now, again, I went into a hotel lobby in Paris once when I took a garden tour to that part of the world and to Keukenhof Gardens. And, there was this beautiful low dish bowl like that on a big table in the entrance to this big, beautiful hotel. And here was this full arrangement. They must have had 50 blooms of that Strelitzia in there, and they looked $1 million. It's just that we planted them in rows in the old days. We put them on pavements, and there's that hedge. That's Zyzigium pondoensis. Makes the most beautiful hedge, and you can clip it more. And those are dwarf agapanthus in the front that haven't flowered yet. Now, if you go to Lawrenceford Estates, you'll find those in full flower. All indigenous, most of that, except for the status. I'm going to slip through these. That's a little thing called Scaevola. It grows on the seashore in New South Wales, in Australia. And it's beautiful. It takes the heat, it takes the salt air, and it's a wonderful coastal plant. It's non-invasive. And it's a little thing called Scaevola, Scaevola, Scaevola. And it's on your list as well. It's a wonderful little thing. And use the restios. You see how the restios give you the linear foliage, contrasting with the low, flat foliage. And then the plant, there's a whole handout for plants. This is just to show you, they're the restios. There's the fynbos, other fynbos. It's all actually fynbos. There's the indigenous ferns. We have got a multitude of indigenous ferns. There's a little nursery up towards Atlantis that specializes in indigenous ferns. And there's a storyboard showing you all the lovely leucadendrons and leucospermums and all those various lovely things. Cheronia and all the rest of it. Perennials, that are going to give you perennial color. Red hot pokers used to be old-fashioned and no one wanted them. They're the most wonderful things in a garden. Trim off the bad leaves. Star jasmine as well. Star jasmine's become amenity horticulture, that little white star flower there. People are planting them all over the council properties because they're kind of easy, but again, it's monoculture. If you just put it in with other things. There's just to show you, that's leucadendron, just beautiful. Look at that red foliage. You can get color in a garden all year round by just planting the right thing. There's cucullatum. I absolutely adore it. Pelargonium cucullatum. It's just wonderful. I love the name, cucullatum. And behind it a cycad. That's indigenous. Nothing wrong with it. Scabiosa africana. That's the best one. It's beautiful. It's more feathery. These are all pelargoniums. Look at them. Marvelous pelargoniums. Agapanthus. Status, Portulacaria. There's a prostrate one, there's a yellow foliaged one, and there's the big shrub one. So there's lots of wonderful things. That's that lovely Erica. Marilyn helped me out. That's the one that they discovered originally in Kirstenbosch not so long ago, and it's now gone all over the place. Versicolor, I think it's called. It's a lovely thing. Aloe arborescens. That's the old kraal aloe. In the Transkei, they used to plant those round the kraals to keep the cattle inside, because they, made big bushes and shrubs. And they're lovely things. Dimophoticas, I mean, what would the world be without them? You go to Europe, they're in the hanging baskets, along with lobelia. Lobelia originated in South Africa. The hybrid lobelia you buy and grow in your garden has come from South Africa. It's from the species lobelia that grows wild. There's dimophoticas, all the lovely daisies. There's ordinary lovely pincushions. I mean, they're just marvelous. And you can prune them. When they get too leggy, prune them down. That's that lovely Salvia chamalegna. It's the most beautiful thing with that sky blue flower, actually. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. You trim it, Salvia chamalegna. It's Chamalegna. Chamalegna. It's the most beautiful. That's an ordinary white pride of India. It's a tough water-wise plant. That's a tough water-wise plant. Leonotus, wild dacha, a white buddleia. Buddleias, the butterflies love these things, and you can get them in purple and white and all the various colors. That's an ordinary bottle brush. That one's called Perth Pink. It's one of the best ever that was brought to South Africa, and it's a great water-wise plant for the Cape. If you are not a purist, sorry, they love, yeah. They have been wonderful. There's one that's taken just about a month ago. Bougainvillea, great Mediterranean plant, named after a man by the name of Bougainville. So it's Bougainvillea, it's French. They come from that part of the world, Spain. Look at that little white pelargonium. That's growing in Kirstenbosch up near the tea room. Beautiful thing, just beautiful. Look at those. These are friends of mine who have got a place at Great Brook, just down on the east coast. North of Mossel Bay, south of George. Beautiful things. They're flying their heads off. Look after themselves. That's a new agapanthus, just glorious. I just wanted to show you to you. It's a cross innerpertus. You know the wild innerpertus which hangs down. It's a cross between the one that goes up and the one that goes down. And that's a white one. Beautiful white one called Snowstorm. That's called Snowstorm. Beautiful thing. You put a plank on top. They're all perfectly level. There's a succulent. I went to a little garden center, super plants or something out near, sort of on the way to Muizenberg there somewhere. And in where? Tokai. And there's a guy there that just makes up these things from the succulents around, and you can buy these containers all beautifully done. I mean, what better than that on a patio? And when I was young, I hated. I came from Durban, where I had hibiscus and bougainvilleas and bananas and avocados, and we grew just about anything. And we, and I hated succulents. But actually, they are so in trend at the moment. Roof gardens, wall gardens, grass gardens, fynbos gardens, succulent gardens. They're all in. They're in. There's some xeriscaping. Now, if you don't have any water. These you'll find are in California or in Mediterranean areas around France. These are all called xeriscaping. If you just Google xeriscaping, you'll see a whole pile of pictures to give you ideas. And there's our cat's tail fern in the front. I used to hate those because when I went to study in Pretoria from Durban, I thought I'd kind of gone across the Iron Curtain. But I mean, those cat's tail ferns, they're fabulous things in a pot. Or in the garden, in the shade. And you see more of them overseas now than you see them here. And that's a chrysanthemum with the yellow flowers. And and some of those things are succulent things, cactus and that. I'm not mad about cactus. We've got lots of lovely succulents. We've got our own aloes and we've got our own succulents. So use them instead of the Mexican stuff. And this is also to show you how flagstones can be used or big stones. And this is all the kind of garden that one should have if you don't have any water. These look after themselves other than a bit of weeding in the gravel and their natural watering that they get. All Mediterranean. Look at that. That's verbenas. And, instead of a brick pathway, look at these, all perfect. There's lots of nice cycads mixed with the cactus, okay, but take the cactus out, put the cycads, put our own aloes and succulents in there, and Bob's your uncle. And look how nice that succulent group looks. In the Condé Nast House and Garden about 2 months ago here in Cape Town, in Constantia, as part of a bigger garden, there were some wonderful pages of a succulent garden, a Mediterranean-looking garden. It was beautifully landscaped, I think, by the owner. Look at how nice the pebbles are there, with things like agaves and things. And you'll see them now. They come up. What I haven't shown there are those very orange. They're called fire sticks. You must probably see them. It's a euphorbia. It's actually native to the north of Africa, but they've kind of found their way down to South Africa. And you'll find them. Those very orange. It looks like a succulent euphorbia. Got milk inside, and they're very, very orange. The foliage in the full sun. They go slightly orange-green in the shade, and they're called fire sticks. It's a euphorbia, like the poinsettia, that you use at Christmas, get at Christmas time. And these are just favourite plants of mine. I just happen to love the old-fashioned single, little small amaryllis. I get those every now and again, put them in a tub. And that's Scadoxus, which grows wild on my farm along the river. The Haemanthus they were now called Scadoxus catherinii. There's one called catherinii. These are little hybrid new buddleias coming into the country. And then eat and practice sustainably. These are just a vegetable garden. You can have a patch. It doesn't have to be huge. This looks big, but it's not that big. And if you're in a townhouse garden, have them in tubs. Have the veggies in tubs, and grow one lot of herbs and mix them up. That's in my garden, and I think that's about it. What have I got there? That's it. And then just, if you Google tanks, you'll have every description of tank you can put in. If you get the Waterwise brochures from Kirsten Bosch or from any garden centre, you can get forest plants if you have a bit of a forest in your garden, bringing nature back to your garden. You can get these wonderful books written by Charles and Julia Buerter. He's a doctor, a medical doctor. Waterwise landscaping, container gardening books. And this is a Fynbos book. Lots of Fynbos books around. Okay. Thank you very much.